this is 2025. It's taken me about 10 years to finally get to this moment in time of getting to have a chance to chat with you. And one of the stories, I just got to get it out of the way before I forget, along the way, is when you came back or came to Jamestown, and there's at least an urban legend in our office, which was Cadwell and Sharp
Right.
at the time, where you had paid a visit there in hopes to do an interview. Do you have recollections of that?
Oh, yeah. It probably will help to fill that in a little bit.
Yeah, we'll get more into it, but it just top of mind.
When I didn't go to law school until after the military, so that was 5 years, 1 month, and 4 days, as a matter of fact.
Who's counting?
And we were in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Most people don't realize how isolated a place that was in those days. No internet. You couldn't even telephone home. So I was applying to law school from there. We wound up at Michigan, and we were talking about where we might like to settle, neither of us really being interested in a big city. Donna's parents were in Warren.
Oh, okay.
Her family had been in the oil business for a few generations, and her dad was a vice president for Harry Logan at United Refining. My parents were over in Allegheny County still at Cuba Lake. And we said we really ought to find a place where, as they grow older, we'll be close to each. And we both decided that the Chautauqua Lake region was a beautiful area, so we ought to look at that. I said, probably on a Christmas break, to her dad, we'd be interested in this area. And if he ever got wind of good law firms in Jamestown that might be looking for a lawyer, to let me know. He said, well, we've got these 3 brothers named Wright up there in Jamestown. They do all of our work in New York, and judging by the time it takes them to get it done, I think they do need help. So he arranged with a call to Bud Wright for us to come up and see Bud Wright. And it was later in the spring that we came up. In terms of timing, it was at a point in time when the old city hall was just being torn down. And anyway, we came and talked to Bud, and then he said he had some other people that maybe we would like to go talk to. And he sent us over to talk to Mr. Michigan at Johnson Peterson, where Johnson assured me that there was no way that those Wrights were ever going to let anybody into their law firm. And he also suggested that we go see Sherry. Well, Sherry was not in charge of your office in those days. Janet Briggs was in charge of your office. And there was no way she was going to let me get past her. So that rumor is correct. The legend lives.
It did. Thank you for confirming all that because we'd heard that story. And yep, and yes, in fact, she was the gatekeeper throughout my entire time period too. So I get it. Flashing back, talk a little bit about your beginning. I mean, where you were born, and talk a little bit about your mom and dad. Talk about your mom and dad a little bit.
Well, sure. Let me do parallels with both Donna and myself.
Oh, sure.
My family, Hamptons, came to America in 1683 from Edinburgh, Scotland. They were Quakers, and they came to Penn's Quaker colony in eastern Pennsylvania. From that time on, it's a lot of centuries, they were essentially small lots, side hill farmers, all the way up into the 20th century. They had come into the Genesee Valley in about 1853, 1854. In my family, there are 5 generations buried in the Genesee Valley, and I still have a brother who lives in the Genesee Valley. Wow. In Donna's case, her family had come to the different Genesee. The Little Genesee, which is over in Bolivar, New York, actually flows to the Allegheny River. But she has 5 generations of her family there. Wow. I was born in Friendship. She was born in Bolivar. We never met until we were teenagers. My family of side hill farmers, and her family, which would be as close to aristocrats as you're going to get in the penumbra of Appalachia, were quite different. But we met in the summer when I was 16, she was 14, at Cuba Lake when my dad bought a cottage there. Her family had been there a long time. Her grandfather had built a beautiful place on Cuba Lake. So I tell people that the scandal of our wedding meant we had to get out of Allegheny County. And so we decided to come to Chautauqua. But my dad was educated in a one-room school. His father was a foreman on a railroad work gangs. His father traveled from place to place within about a 50-mile radius wherever the gang was working. His mother kept house, so to speak. She had a cow, she had chickens. When he was in high school, she would take her eggs down to the railroad station in Fillmore every couple of days. She'd put them on the train to New York, and they'd be fresh eggs being sold the next day in New York City. Mm-hmm. And somebody who was buying them would mail her a check. The cow was used for their own consumption. My dad was a pretty smart guy and a smart aleck, and he graduated from high school in Fillmore at age 14. Mm. They decided that he should repeat another year at the Fillmore High School. So he did, and often said that he took every course you could take in the Fillmore High School, including home economics. Then somehow they put together the money to send him up to Houghton. So he entered Houghton College at age 15. Someplace around we have a copy of the yearbook from his freshman year, and he's on this page, and Raleigh Kidder's Aunt Eunice is on the opposing page. However, my dad didn't last long at Houghton because everything that was forbidden at Houghton, he did really well. The true story being told is that he got thrown out for stealing chains off the fire hydrants, and we suspect they were selling them for beer money. Yeah. But so from there on, he labored in a number of places, a cook on a railroad, in the oil fields, and when he got married to my mother, she, being from Belfast and Canada on the river, he decided it was time for him to get a little more serious about life. So he went to Alfred and got a degree in what they called electrical engineering in those days, but this Alfred State, and it was really mostly radio stuff. At that point, he went back to work at Acme Electric in Cuba, where he had been previously employed as a laborer working in the shipping room. From then on, he advanced pretty quickly. His real break, however, came because in the Catskills, there is a famous old fishing lodge called the Antrim Lodge. And guys, and they were all guys, who were in his kind of business, sales engineers, would gather there to exchange whatever information they'd picked up someplace. And so he was on his way back to Friendship, where we lived, and he stopped in at the Antrim Lodge. Guys like Joe and myself have been there many times in the basement bar. He was in the basement bar. He ordered a beer and he went to the men's room. When he got in the men's room, he heard one guy telling another guy that IBM was about to fire its power supply suppliers. Power supplies being capacitors and transformers and the things that Acme Electric made. He went out, paid for his beer, got in his car, and went straight back to Poughkeepsie. The next morning, he was standing outside the purchasing manager's office when the guy came to work. And he got the account. Wow. And that was the real making of his career when he got back, and they reported that to the president. And then he just kept going up and up, and he eventually became president of the company, took the company on the New York Stock Exchange, moved from there to chairman of the board and still a chief executive officer, and always said that his biggest catch he ever made was trolling in the bar in the Antrim Lodge.
And going to the men's room. There you go.
Yeah. Now, as I say, Donna family was over in Bolivar. I don't know if you've ever traveled that road that goes really up high. and back down into Bolivar down on the border. But up at the very highest part there, it's about roughly 2,000 feet. There's a very small community called Wirt. And there, a fellow was born whose name was Walter Hazard. Walter Hazard moved to Jamestown, got in the insurance business, eventually had his own insurance agency, did quite well, and he came up here and he bought this property off what was originally the Winch Farm, and he built this house in 1935. So the guy who built this house was born halfway between where I was born and Donna was born in Allegheny County. Isn't that a tale?
Wow.
And then when Cy and Marilyn bought it, Donna befriended Marilyn when she came to town, and they became bridge partners in the Lakewood Women's Club bridge tournaments. So Donna had been up here. I had never been here. We represented Cy for years, but I had never, I'd been in his old house, but I'd never been here. So when Donna and I had also grown up lakeside in Summers. So we weren't really interested, as most people were, and they reached the ability to do so, to move to lakeside. Yeah. And so she heard that Marilyn was going to sell this after Cy died, and she said, "That's the place I want to be." So that's how we happened to buy it. We'd been in the village 18 years until we came up here in 2000.
So you graduate from where? What's your
Friendship Central High School in a class of 22.
And what year was that?
That was 1960.
So you graduate in 1960, and then your thoughts turned towards college.
Yeah, I was interested in going to West Point. Her dad was a West Pointer, and Charlie Goodell was the assembly person in the U.S. House, I mean, and I think he awarded me a third alternate, which is pretty far down the list. But my dad had seen sort of a tear off the tag ad for naval ROTC scholarships. And he brought that home one day and said, "Maybe you want to try this." I applied, I got the scholarship, and I had to find a place to go to school. If you had put me on the Erie Railroad in Friendship, New York, and told me to go to Yale, for example, I wouldn't have known whether to take the train east or take the train west. But the University of Rochester had quite a reputation. There weren't a lot of high school graduates who had gone to Rochester, but for example, all of the children of a couple of local doctors, that's where they went, and they had an ROTC unit there, NROTC unit. So I applied to go to Rochester. They wrote back and said, you've been admitted. But everybody has to take the SAT exams. So even though you're admitted, you got to take the SAT. So I think my dad took me up to Rochester and I took the SAT. Didn't make any difference.
Yeah.
I went to the University of Rochester and I majored in Navy and fraternity and graduated not with any high honors, but graduated. And then from there, I went into the Navy. I had, well, we say this differently. In those days, and we have a son-in-law who is a graduate of the Air Force Academy, flew F-16s for years and years and years, and then spent quite a bit of time in Air Force intelligence. And he shakes his head every time I tell him how well trained we were in the summer over that period from 60 to 64. The first summer, you spent 2 months every summer on active duty. The first summer, we all went to sea on an aircraft carrier. The second summer, you spent a month at Corpus Christi, Texas, flying. And we flew every single day. Ground school in the morning, fly in the afternoon. Then they packed us off to Little Creek, Virginia, and gave us rifles and Marine outfits, and trained us as Marines for a month, all the way up to actually doing an amphibious landing from a ship at sea.
Wow.
In senior year, or the summer between junior and senior, the goal of most of the midshipmen was to catch a cruise in the Mediterranean. I wasn't particularly interested in that, and I applied to go into submarines. So I spent 2 months in New London in a diesel submarine, and it was a school boat. We went to sea every morning. We were taking enlisted classes that summer, and we did 16 dives every single day. I'm happy to say we did 16 surfaces as well.
Amen.
But it was a hell of an exposure.
Wow, yeah.
Because we didn't have any officer students on board. So the officers on board were bored themselves, and we only had 2 midshipmen, and they put us to work, and we essentially trained as junior officers on that submarine.
Wow.
When it was time to make a decision about what one would be assigned to when we graduated, I first of all had apparently done pretty well as far as my sit rep was concerned from the summer, because got a call to come into the captain's office, and he said, "You've been directed to make application to go into submarines."
Directed to make application. I like that.
Yeah, and I said, "You got to be kidding me!" And I got an economics major with a C+ average. They're going to take me in nuclear subs? He said, "Rickover says you are to apply. You will apply." So I sent in an application, and as soon as my academic record was clear, I got an immediate rejection, of course, and never expected anything different. But I was interested in going into smaller ships. And having come from a very long line of Quakers, not a single male in my family ever having served in the military before, minesweepers, ocean minesweepers, seemed a good choice. I selected that and was selected, sent to Charleston, South Carolina, to an ocean-going minesweeper, and loved it. Again, within the first month and a half, I was conning the ship underway, all kinds of responsibility. Then we got deployed to Guantanamo Bay for 6 months. And our job was to go back and forth in the windward passage between Hispano and Cuba. And this was post Cuban Missile Crisis. So we challenged every ship coming through and got their identification and who they were and where they were going. And then we'd spend the next week in port and then the next week out. But as a part of that, our squadron took with us 3 guys who were Navy EOD, Explosive Ordnance Disposal. And as soon as we tied up at Pier Lima in Gitmo, they were off the ship. And they had a shack on the pier. Their bunks were in the shack. They had an old oil barrel cut in half that was their barbecue pit. And they had a great big cooler full of beer. And I said to myself, that's my kind of Navy right there. Well, EOD was one of those things that you had to volunteer for. Nobody ever got assigned that didn't volunteer, which I did. Got selected and got sent that next January to underwater swimmer school in Key West, Florida. Underwater swimmer school was 2 months. Underwater swimmer school was tough. It's not like BUDS. BUDS is basic underwater demolition. That's where they're really crazy. He's the guys with the telephone poles doing sit-ups and just insane stuff that they get put through. But underwater swimmer school was tough. We started with 55 guys. Mostly among the enlisted people, they were more senior. They weren't nobody brand new. Among the officers, there were 6 of us. There was a Marine captain who was Marine Recon, had already done a couple of tours in the jungles of Vietnam, and myself, I was a JG at the time, and there were 4 buck ensigns right out of OCS. At the end of 2 months, we were down to 5. I'm sorry, 5 officers. We were down to 12 total. And the Marine captain had washed out. Toughest guy I could ever imagine. Strapped steel. But you put him underwater, and he panicked every time. By the 3rd week, he was gone. From there, from graduation in Key West, we got sent to the Army Chemical School in Anniston, Alabama, and we spent 3 weeks there working with chemical and biological weapons, with all rubber suits and the dying sheep and all that. This is crazy stuff. Then you go to Indian Head, Maryland, and the school at Indian Head is another 26 weeks. And in that period of time, you're trained to disarm every known munition that anybody might get in trouble with, including a couple of Soviet atomic weapons. How they got them, I have no idea. But I guarantee you they had them inside 6 fences. And we finished there in early December. But Donna had graduated from Northwestern. She majored in biology, minored in chemistry, and had in mind maybe she was going to seek a career in medicine someplace. So we arrived in the Washington area almost exactly at the same time. And spent a lot of time together from there until it was time to, for me, to get an assignment out of EOD school. Almost everybody, certainly everybody in my class, was being sent to Vietnam. But when I went in to see the detailer, he said, well, this is really interesting, you know. The officer in charge of the team in Guantanamo Bay just had a heart attack. And I don't have anybody to send to relieve him. What do you think about going to Gitmo? I said, I know Gitmo. I'd be happy to go to Gitmo. Came back and we immediately approached her dad and said we want to get married. And we did on New Year's Eve. I got sent 10 days later to Gitmo, and she came a couple of months later. The naval base had been cleared of civilian families a couple of times over those years. One at the time of the missile crisis, and the other when Admiral Buckley was John Kennedy's commanding officer in the Philippines. Buckley, when Castro threatened to shut off the water, Buckley went up with a group of photographers and an axe. Said basically, screw you, I'm going to cut our water. So from that point on, they had to depend on an old desalinization ship in the harbor until they got a new water plant built. So off all the dependents went again, and they were being brought back, which meant it took a while for Donna to get there. But then we were there for to another 2.5 years.
Wow.
Wonderful place to be.
Did you have much interaction with the natives, the Cubans? I mean, did you get off
Yes.
and stuff?
Yes. Because the officer in charge of the EOD team was usually a fairly senior Mustang warrant officer. That position was also designated as the Naval Station Ordnance Officer and the Naval Base Ordnance Officer, which meant my billet was also in charge of 100 acres of magazine areas. And we were actively taking ordnance off ships, storing them in the magazines. Then when ships would come out of the yards on the East Coast and get a whole new crew and have to go through what's called reftre, which is refresher training, they would come to Gitmo. And then for, depending on the ship, anything from a month to a month and a half, they would go out every day and do training for all of the crew. Then they'd come in and we would take all of their munitions down to them and load them, with the exception of nuclear weapons. There were no nukes stored in Cuba. A lot of, well, let me put it in numbers. I had about 50 civilians working for me, and 30 or 35 of those were Cubans. Some of them were expats who'd come through the gate one day and never went back. And a lot of them came through the gate every single morning and went back through the gate back to Cuba at night. Then there were another 50 Jamaicans that came in for 6 months contract labor. They were the people who mowed lawns in the magazine areas and that sort of labor work. But the Cubans were all very skilled people. My carpenter, my welder, the guys who had to know and who we had to depend upon when things broke, they were mostly Cubans. And I got to know a few of them pretty well.
Yeah.
But as far as having any off-base contact with Cubans, no.
So what was the temperature like there, the political temperature at the time? I mean, obviously Castro, communism, still, this is the post.
It was politically, and in terms of any remaining Cold War problems, was nothing. Yeah. We were real quiet. I had the only EOD team in the entire Caribbean, and they didn't need us much. We spent most of our time disposing of ordnance that was out of date. We spent some of our time helping out with the Marines when they would screw things up a couple of times a month that we had to go fix. Rifle-propelled grenades were the worst.
Really?
Because they'd be out training with them and they'd fire them out in the sand flats Well, those grenades are designed so you can fire one up against a wall and it's going to bounce in someplace, and it's got an always acting fuse on it that looks like a hexagon. Well, when they hit soft sand, they didn't do anything. So we'd have to go find them and blow them up in place. I
mean, this is dangerous stuff, Mark. I mean, were you ever kind of like, what am I really doing? Did you have a moment, especially when you got married and all of a sudden you have a child and a...
No. Nah. Who knows, at that age. I have ever since said a lot of times to people, whatever it is doesn't worry me. I've had a lot of luck already.
Well, yeah.
At this point, I'm more than content with how far my luck has gone. If it runs out, it runs out.
So Guantanamo Bay at some point comes to an end, and then what next?
When I went to law school, applying to law school was a little tricky that far away.
Right.
The mails took a long time to go anyplace. Mail boats or planes would go out, a couple times a week maybe. I took the LSAT in Gitmo. I was fortunate enough to have a very high score. That helped. I didn't have a lot of pride in my academic record, but it was also over 5 years old, and I don't know that the law schools could find it. I had taken a course from Old Dominion University that was taught by the base legal officer that was commercial law. Mm-hmm. And I'd had an A in commercial law. So maybe this high score and a single A greased the skids for me. I didn't know a lot about law schools. I knew Cornell, and I knew Dickinson, and probably Buffalo or Albany. It's too far back to remember. Yeah. But I applied to Dickinson, I applied to Cornell, I applied to Columbia. I had never heard of the Michigan Law School, but the new guy who was a good friend of ours and was a base legal officer had graduated from Michigan. So he lobbied for me to apply to Michigan, which I did. I got immediately accepted at Dickinson, and they told me I could have a free ride. But I had to respond with a check for $250 and accept them within 2 weeks. Hadn't heard from anybody else. So yeah, sure, I sent my check to Dickinson. And then I got an acceptance at Columbia, and I got an acceptance at Michigan, and I didn't hear a thing from Cornell. We talked about it. Columbia was going to be very expensive. Mm-hmm. An advantage of Michigan was that they had a policy that for military who had been involuntarily extended in military service, so they could not get to Michigan and establish residency before going to didn't matter, undergraduate or in this case law school. After the first semester, you were permitted to qualify as in-state. Well, the difference between in-state tuition there and the tuition at Columbia, where, by the way, they laughed when I asked them if they were going to give me any financial help. It was quite a difference. And then what I didn't have any idea of was that in the law school ratings, for a decade, Harvard and Yale had swapped first and second, and Michigan had been third for a very long time. And that pretty much set the decision right there, and we decided on Michigan. Michigan also had a program where you could go straight through in the summer. So you could complete law school in 2.5 compared to 3 years. Save a term of tuition.
Yeah.
And that was a big help. And the GI Bill was available, and that was a big help. So we essentially came out of law school with no debt.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Then you talked about, the prelude to our conversation was how you came back here to Jamestown thinking about where you would go, what you would do. And we kind of left that conversation where Janet Briggs shut you down at Cadwell and Sharp, and then you made a decision.
Well, I was pretty heavily recruited by a firm in Rochester. The guy who had been president of the Deke House 4 years ahead of me was at the advancing junior partner stage, and a couple of other former fraternity brothers were in that firm, and they kept after me. Couldn't I find some time to come and clerk there? I said, hey, I go to school full time. Well, we sure like to have you come so we can take a look at each other. So in the early summer, I had an estate planning seminar, and I was taking corporations. So I went to my professor in corporations and said to him, how did he feel about me disappearing for a couple of weeks? And I'd get the notes from somebody else. And the deal was, yeah, that would be fine, but no matter how I did on a final, I was going to get a C in the course. Okay.
Pick your poison.
I figured that was an even swap. So I went to Rochester, got along very well, but the Wrights started to take an interest. And eventually I got an offer from them at about the same time that the recruiting people from this firm in Rochester came out to Michigan. And the offer from the Wrights was pretty competitive with Rochester, and it better met our goal of being in close proximity to her parents as well. Not that we had any objection to being in Rochester. I'd spent a lot of time in Rochester. But it also turned out that Rochester was going off the cliff. And nobody, including the people there, knew it at the time. You can be sure that the Bausch and Lomb people and the Xerox people and the Kodak people never expected the kind of downturn that they had.
Right.
So it was a great decision to come here. And the Wrights, of course, are great people. It was a little difficult to start because I wasn't going to get any salary at all until I was admitted. So I had an office in the Fenton building for studying for the bar exam, and took the bar exam. My dad called me from New York City one day, and he'd gotten up in the morning and gone down for breakfast, got the New York Times, and he said he opened to the page that had the people who'd passed the bar exam, and he didn't find my name. He said, I put the paper away and had my breakfast and took a few deep breaths, and I went back and read it again. Down at the bottom, there was a squib that said people who'd passed the bar exam but had not fully qualified. That's when he called me. And I said, what that means is I haven't been back in the state of New York for 6 months. They got to have 6 months residency. But we're still in those situations, which you've seen many times before, where you don't get admitted until a long time later when they get the whole mob up there and do it. Well, Bob Wright was a good friend of Reed Mole, who was a justice on the appellate division at the time. So he calls his buddy Reed Mole and says, look, I got this young guy, and he's not going to get paid until we can get him admitted. What do you think you can do? And Reed called back and said, well, if you can get him through the Character and Fitness Committee, he can come up here and we'll get him admitted. So I traveled around up to Buffalo to see Bob Malanzi, off to Batavia to see, I know his name, can't recall it now, but everybody signed off, and I took all that stuff to Albany, drove right to Albany with a major hurricane on my right-hand side and sunshine over Lake Ontario on my left. One of my fraternity brothers had been practicing for a while in Albany in a good firm, and he was pretty active in the New York State Bar. In fact, he graded bar exams. And he said, come on up and we'll go down the next morning and I'll show you where to file all these papers, which we did. And then we got a call that said, tell Hampton to be up here in Rochester on such and such a morning, I think a week or so ago, away. And we went, Donna and I, my parents showed up. I don't think her parents were there. And we went into the courtroom. It was 9 o'clock in the morning, and all of the justices come out. And who was, I think Goldman was the Chief Justice of that division. And he called me to come up, and he said, "Mr. Hampton, I want you to know that this sets a real precedent for this court. That I can't recall in all my time here that we've ever sworn in a single person, nor can I recall us coming on the bench at 9 in the morning." That was it, sworn in, back to Jamestown. You know, just, did I mention a little luck in life?
Wow, that's a great story. That is a great story. Well, there you go. Bob was making sure that you got some money.
Yeah, his money.
Oh, that's good.
So then that all worked out pretty well. It was not long after that maybe a year and a half, Bill Evans had been the associate corporation counsel. He resigned. Stan Lundeen appointed me. Then Bob Alessi resigned, and lo and behold, this young guy from an absolutely rock-solid Republican law firm
Yeah, I was going to say, this is shocking.
was appointed the corporation counsel.
For Stan Lundeen.
At about the same time, Sam Alessi came rapping at the door one day. Sam was on the county legislature at the time. He was the chair of the airport commission. Mm-hmm. And he said, "Mark, I've got a client I want to share with you." I said, "Sam, your brother Bob shared a client with me last week. I don't think I need any more." He said, no, this is going to be good." Well, it turned out that what he wanted me to do was to review a lease of the county airport facilities to a guy who was coming to Jamestown to start a Allegheny commuter. I said, "Yeah, I'll do that." And so he gave me a copy of it. Donna and I went up to Chautauqua, and I remember sitting in the back of the Hall of Christ, and Leslie Rom was giving a concert by herself. And I went through that whole thing in that concert. The guy shows up the next day, and I went through it with him and told him what I thought. And he smiled, and he pulls out this thing about this thick. And he said, "Would you have time to review this, do you think?" Well, boom. It's the franchise agreement for a Allegheny commuter.
This is Joel Hall.
Joel Hall he never was in the military. He always wanted to fly. He was an electrical engineering graduate of the University of New Hampshire. He was a heavy smoker, and he did not have a good history of men in his family surviving to old age. Mm-hmm. So he had a heart attack at the time he was a chief pilot of Mohawk. So he was up in Utica, and they took him off the line. They put him in charge of the pilot training program for Mohawk. And at about this time, Mohawk and Allegheny Airlines merged. You probably don't remember back to those days, but Mohawk was basically across central New York. And Allegheny Airlines was the same sort of thing across Pennsylvania. the guys who were the original organizers and the shareholders of Allegheny were a bride.
Yes.
Henry Satterwhite, and I don't remember all the others, merged Mohawk into Allegheny. But then Allegheny was having problems with passenger loads because they were flying milk runs. You know, if you were coming out of Erie, PA, going to New York City, you might stop as many places as the Erie Railroad did before you got there. And it was one flight a day stuff.
Yeah.
So they decided that they would try this hub and spoke system of small cities into Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. And they went around from city to city like Jamestown and all over Pennsylvania. And they mostly interviewed fixed base operators to see if they thought they'd qualified to take on this task of the feeding in. They'd already established one. They were working on one of the small cities south of here, beyond Oil City. And they came to Jamestown. They weren't very impressed with who had it in those days. Jerry Hall, and there's a guy in Faulkner who had a boat business. I don't remember his name. Anyway, so they went to Joel, and they said, would you be interested in going to Jamestown and starting a hub and spoke system out of Jamestown? And they had the idea that they wanted to do both Pittsburgh, and they also wanted to feed Buffalo. Mm-hmm. He had to buy 2 Beech 99 aircraft. Allegheny Airlines guaranteed the loans, and it was off and running. And it just kept running and running and running. We bought the 3rd Beech 99 in Vancouver. Joel and I flew out there and hung around for a week. Wow. Trying to get this airplane that was flying, I think it was flying to Kamloops, and eventually made a deal. And then we were up to 3. And after that, we bought airplanes. We bought airplanes from Fairchild in Texas. We bought them from Short in Belfast, Northern Ireland. Shorts originally, Short Brothers were balloon guys. And then they got a franchise from the Wright brothers and started building biplanes in England, and then moved up in the aircraft business. And the Second World War started. They moved the entire manufactory to Belfast to get as far away from the Germans as they could. And they put it in the Harrington and Richardson shipyard where they built the Titanic. And that's what there was this British airplane company up there, and they built the, in our case, the Short 330s that looked like the boxcar, remember?
I do, absolutely.
And they built those to be cargo aircraft for basically third world militaries that dropped down and had to drive jeeps and other smaller Nothing as heavy as a tank, but
Yeah.
smaller stuff in there. And then they got the idea they could probably sell them in the commuter market, and we bought them.
How many did you have finally? I mean, it was a big operation.
Boy, we added Charlottesville, we added Akron, Canton, we added Hamilton. I think we had 13 stations. And we had dropped Buffalo pretty quickly. Just it was too close. And as I recall, we had 26 or 27 aircraft.
Did he sell it while he was alive, or?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
He sold it to a couple of brothers. Their name was Sands, may still be Sands. I don't know where they are. But they actually owned a small insurance company in Florida. I think it was called Guarantee Insurance. But they were doing something that is a no-no in the insurance business. They were buying operating companies. And insurance companies were not supposed to be buying operating companies. But it's not safe enough to do that and be able to actually generate what you need to pay on insurance policies. They sent a guy in here whose name was Hall as well to run this place. He didn't know a goddamn thing about airlines. He knew a lot about mergers and acquisitions, but he apparently knew president, right? Joel was supposed to stay on for 2 years, and I told him before he sold, you're never going to stay 2 years. You're not going to imagine. You can't imagine how much you're going to hate working for somebody else. Yeah. And he did. He hated it. He quit and moved to Florida permanently. Then the insurance company went bankrupt. It was the biggest insurance failure, in-state insurance failure, in the history of the state of Florida. The big insurance guys, the Metropolitans, etc., said, we can't have this happen. Yeah, this. If this is the tip of the iceberg, we're going to be just like the thrift industry was 4 or 5 years ago. So they put together a company called Guarantee Reinsurance, and they went to the state of Florida, and they bought that company out of bankruptcy. And they said, we'll take over every one of their companies, and we will guarantee every one of their insurance policies, and we will pay off all of their creditors. And they had a guy whose name was Armstrong. He was a lawyer, who was supervising this new unusual business. Well, of course, he didn't know a damn thing about running an airline either. And Joel, I don't remember if he was just very sick or he had just passed away. But at that point it was had become U.S. Air, and the headquarters had moved from National Airport down to Charlotte, and had been there for quite a while. U.S. Air said, all right, we'll be willing to give you another operating agreement, what the franchise agreement was called, but your last two have been for 10 years, and this is going to be for 5 years. And you must pack up lock, stock, and barrel and go to Cincinnati because we want to start a similar hub and spoke system out of Cincy. That's when everything left up here.
I remember that, yeah. You know, Mark, when I think of you in so many aspects, but one clearly is your relationship with the Jamestown Board of Public Utilities.
Yes?
How did that start? Was that a Jim Pullen relationship?
Well, the Corporation Council was responsible for the BPU. The Corporation Council had certain responsibilities. The General Hospital was one, the BPU was one, and the Associate Corporation Council had to hang out with some other committees. When I became Corporation Counsel, therefore I started being the General Counsel for the BPU, the hospital, and a few other things. And when I left the Corporation Counsel office, Jim Pullen and Marion Panzarella came to me and said, "We'd like you to continue. Would you be willing to continue as General Counsel if we can sell it to the board?" And I said, "Sure." So from that point on for, I don't know, probably 20 years,
How was you?
I represented the BPU. I spent a lot of time rubbing elbows with the municipal systems elsewhere, all of which, not all of which, most of which were pretty small. And they sometimes came up with questions as well. Wellsville was a very interesting one because Wellsville is a village. Allegheny County has no cities. Wellsville is a village. Wellsville had a municipal distribution system, and there was a strong cadre of people who felt they should dissolve the village of Wellsville. And the question at that point was, if we dissolve the Wellsville village, then we go automatically into the whole town. But our franchise would be about right for a municipal distribution system only covers the village. What happens next? Well, the answer was nobody quite knew because nobody had done it before. So they hired me to come over there and give them some guidelines about how this might work, if it could work. And I looked it all over and I said, well, wait a minute, there's a more basic problem right here. The law for dissolving villages was amended 2 years ago, and these people who have got all the petitions out and are organizing the public hearings have not followed the law. So the whole campaign collapsed. And I never heard from them again, and they never dissolved the village.
Nice. Did you ever find yourself have to, I'm harkening back to Robert Jackson, he was involved, of course, in the way back when the merger of the BPU and, was it Niagara, the predecessor to Niagara Mohawk. It kind of goes way back to the 40s, 30s when he was Corporation Counsel. Did you ever have to muscle around with Niagara Mohawk? I mean, you got your own franchise within the BPU, and there are certainly areas outside of that franchise that I would love to have the benefit of the rates of the city, the expansion of the territory, the expansion of the city jurisdiction. Does that come up in your work?
No. In my tenure, there were never any major problems that came to my attention, at least, with Niagara Mohawk. The tension came with National Fuel Gas. Right in Hampton had represented the PA Gas Company, sort of like United Refining, for their New York work for years, but they were located in Erie. Once they moved to Buffalo, then there was a very natural tendency to give all of their business to one law firm or another in Buffalo.
I've heard of that one law firm, yeah.
Then the Board of Public Utilities bought an LM6000 GE gas-fired turbine generator and proposed to build a pipeline into the BPU for dedicated gas supply. And that was not the least bit popular with National Fuel Gas. So yes, then we had some real conflicts going on and lawsuits, and spent a bit of time in Supreme Court. Eventually, the BPU won that case, built a pipeline. I don't think there's a lot of gas generation these days. Because the entire market of buying and swapping electricity is not just complicated, but it's a matter of keeping track of what prices you can pick up and where.
Unrelated. Corporation Council. This is just another urban legend. I think I probably heard from Rick Sotier. That in order to be either a corporation council or maybe even an associate corporation council, you had to own property in the city of Jamestown as a requirement. And that somehow there was a vacant piece of property that when you lived outside of the city, in order to qualify, technically that land would sort of transfer from associate corporate council to another. Is that urban legend?
No, that's a myth.
Okay, that's a Sotier myth. Okay, I'll leave it at that. You also, being a submarine guy, did you ever have conversations with Lee Town Adams and his, World War II submarine experiences? Did you ever share notes?
One didn't have conversations with Lee Town Adams. One sat across from his desk while he played solitaire with those ancient cards, and he told you stories. He never, I'm pretty sure, never told any war stories. I'm not sure that his memory went back beyond Yale Law School. His understanding of the law never proceeded for a day beyond his graduation from the Yale Law School.
We're getting that Phi Beta Kappa key.
And that was from Rochester. He I can see him right now. But Judge, the law clearly says, not in my court it isn't. Spit. There are some of the old guys, Lucian Ledestro was one of the more outspoken about what a son of a bitch Lee Town Adams was to practice against. If you remember the Lee Town Adams obituary, which he wrote himself,
No, I didn't know that.
he openly admitted that he made up cases and put them in briefs and local court cases, and that his opponents were too lazy to look them up and find out that they weren't real. This is a county judge, for Christ's sake. You can get the obituary and read it. It says that.
Well, that's good. So at some point you expanded your partnership at Right Hampton.
We're coming.
Soon, but if we're going to tie it right into your guest. Yeah, at one
Who's out
point,
here? She's here.
I know we'll be right there. Just
Oh,
like,
okay. I'll follow.
and
Pour wine for everybody, and that'll take care of it.
and so Cindy at the time, to tie in for the camera purposes, my wife Cindy was the first confidential law clerk in Chautauqua County history, and she clerked for Judge Lee Town Adams and Willard Cass.
Right?
And she did so for a period of time until such time as she got a inquiry or an offer. I'm not even sure how it happened, to be honest with you, from a law firm named Right Hampton. Do you recall how that happened?
Oh, I know how it happened. It happened because I said, there's this young woman lawyer that's working in Mayville, and I'm impressed that she could make a pretty good addition to this firm, and hiring a woman in this firm, I believe would make a good impression in the community as well. I had a very strong bias generally in that direction, because when we came to Jamestown in 1971, there were no women on bank boards. There were no women running not-for-profits. There were a lot of places where there were no women members, including Moonbrook at the time. There were no men whose names ended in a vowel on any of the bank boards or any of foundations, you name it. And we Don and I looked at each other and said, what the hell? I'd come from Michigan. Now, admittedly, even though there were a number of women in my class, there wasn't a single woman professor at the University of Michigan. When I graduated from University of Rochester in 1960, I think there were only 2 women on the faculty of the entire university. Mm-hmm. And this makes no sense whatsoever. You look at Jamestown today and tell me what things women are now running that are not better run than they've ever been before.
Oh, it's unbelievable. I was talking about that the other day. Every not-for-profit is successfully run by a woman. Yeah.
So basically, Yeah, in terms of remembering details about negotiating it beyond that, I can't tell you. But I can tell you that history, and the fact that quite obvious that Cindy would make a real good associate.
And you brought her on, and I'm sure she'll be the first to tell you what a phenomenal experience it was, and then you ultimately made her a partner, which was an incredibly big deal for her and the family. So we thank Right in Hampton, and especially Mark Hampton.
She earned every bit of it.
But what I remember also is because of that, you permitted her to be involved in the community, and she became the first female president of the Jamestown Bar Association, and she reached out for the first time ever to get Court of Appeals, New York State Court of Appeals, which for the camera is the top court, chief judge here and an associate to come to Jamestown. And there's still, probably I think to this day at Wright in Calamari, a picture of you and the Saul Wackler and Bellicosa, Judge Bellicosa, yeah. You started all that. The rest is history.
I know it well.
Yeah. So here we are, Mark. You knew I was coming. Is there a question you expected I would ask you today that I haven't?
Not really. I did expect, and therefore I sort of drifted into some of the airline history because I knew you were interested, and because I know it doesn't exist very many places these days. Everybody who was a part of it is gone somewhere, and now both Joel and Gloria are dead. Their children are God knows where in the world, but they're certainly not writing the history of Chautauqua Airlines.
So this is from your son-in-law minutes ago.
Say again?
This is from your son-in-law.
Oh.
He sent me a text. Just so you know, at a cottage on Cuba Lake, met Donna. University of Rochester on an NROTC scholarship. Surface Navy officer stationed at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba.
Forever.
And transferred to explosive ordnance disposal. This is all Kenny feeding me stuff. Learned to dive and take apart bombs. Returned to Gitmo. Had Alice. Left Navy and went to University of Michigan Law. Had Emily. Got recruited to Jamestown by Wrights. Had Polly and Charles. Repped Chautauqua Airlines, BPU, and many others at Wright in Hampton. And finally, accepted Kenny as a son-in-law. Is this all accurate?
Right down to the very last one. And Kenny is just amazing. He can do anything. Yeah, if you've never been, you should come back and go over and look at his sawmill and look at the things he's built.
Okay.
He's got a 9-foot black walnut dining room table that he made from a black walnut tree that died out here, and we cut it down and we rolled it up into the mill, and he's cut the boards. He built a lot of furniture over there.
Wow, that's phenomenal.
But he can build almost anything. All right, we owe these ladies.
We do, and on the record, I just want to thank you, Mark, specifically for your various degrees of support at the Sheldon Foundation to benefit our Jackson Center throughout all its myriad of years, going back to Miles Lasser. And I know there was the man behind the curtain, and that was Mark Hampton.
I think that you should amend that a little bit, because you can be sure from the position of being inside in the Sheldon Foundation, when you guys were looking for a little more money and a little more money and a little more money, I made sure we kept your feet at the fire.
You did. And Raleigh will be confirming that.